make sure you look up if you're on camera.
Beautiful.
Good evening. We're going to get started. We're first going to hear from
Eric.
Eric, and he's going to talk about ranked choice voting for 2 minutes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eric, and I'm with Fair Vote Minnesota. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan voter education organization. And we are basically out making sure that every Minneapolis voter knows about ranked choice voting, which means that instead of voting for one candidate, you actually get to vote for your top 3 favorites. So tonight, when we hear from our excellent candidates, make sure to think about who appeals to you most, first of all, who really connects with you a lot, second, and who generally has your interests in mind, third. It is very important. We have a table right outside if you'd like to know more about ranked choice voting, about how the votes get moved around, and I look forward to the forum. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Paula Pentel. I'll be moderating tonight's candidate forum. This is the future of transportation, and I'm going to just make a shout out to some of the organizations that are sponsoring it. There's Chris Iverson, an urban studies and civil engineering student representing the Interdisciplinary Transportation Student Organization. We also have Streets MN with Bill Lindeke and Dave Levinson here, as well as Nick Magrino from Urban MSP. Minneapolis Bike Coalition with Scott Schaefer, and the Minnesota Urban Studies Student Association. I'm the advisor there in the Urban Studies program, and just for full disclosure, I am an elected official, but not in Minneapolis. The way the forum is going to work tonight is that someone is going to pull a name out of my hand. This will be where the votes are, or the answers are going to come across to us. And we're going to start with you, Stephanie. Tonight we are going to have 5 questions that have come from these organizations. Each person is going to have 2 minutes to answer those questions. And we've got timekeepers in front. You will be warned at 1 minute, 30 seconds, and stop. The bike bell goes off and you stop talking. And then we move on to the next person. If you need me to repeat the question, I'm happy to do that. Additionally, in a few moments, probably between questions, we have these cards. At the end of the formal 5 questions, we want to be able to have the opportunity for each candidate to answer a specific question. And so on these cards, you can circle the name of the candidate that you would like to answer a question and write your question down. We will have folks from some of the volunteers handing those out. Between questions here, we'll ask you guys to put your hands up if you want to have one of those cards, and then we will collect them and have them ready at the end of the 5 questions that we're going to go through. Let's see, what else do we need to know? If you want to tweet, hashtag Transportation Forum. Other than that, please turn off the ringers on your phone, and let's get started. This is a warm-up question, and each of you get 30 seconds for this one. We all come to transit with our own personal histories. So think back to your youth. How did you first leave your home on your own? What mode of transit did you use? Were you a pedestrian running away from home? Escape on your bicycle? Hop on a bus? Take a cab? How did you leave your home? Stephanie, you begin.
I grew up on a farm in Iowa, so we had a bike, but we had I remember having a 1980 Honda moped. You know, those bright yellow ones. You kids probably don't remember because you're not that old, but I think the maximum speed was 35 miles per hour. So I used to ride my moped to school, and also my moped and my bike, it was probably about a mile and a half away to school, and we would hang out at the pool. But I thought it was so cool riding my moped, and I wish I would have never sold that thing because it's a classic.
Thank you, Dan. Cohen.
I think the first times that I ever left home, I was sent out on errands for my parents. So I would go by foot to a convenience store, which was about a block or so away, pick up cigarettes, which they sold me, and bring them home to my parents. And I even remember the brands. They don't even make them anymore. It's a brand called Virginia Rounds. I thought that was a very interesting name.
Bob.
Oh, thanks. outside, the earliest thing I can remember is not even walking, but I started biking as soon as I remember I think I could walk. And it gravitated to the position where by the time I was 15 and I'd worked a lot of summer jobs, I saved up money to buy my Jeton bike, which I still have. And I was so proud of that because I didn't get my license until I was almost 18. So that Jeton I still use it today.
Thank you, Betsy.
The first things I did was walk to my friends' houses and bike to my friends' houses. But I am thinking about high school when a friend of mine and I would walk from our house a couple miles to the bus. I grew up in the suburbs, to the bus, and then we take the bus into downtown and hang out downtown, and then we take the bus to Uptown and hang out in Uptown, and then we take the bus back to the mall and then walk 2 miles home. It was awesome, and it's part of the reason I live in the city today, to be honest.
Thank you. And Cam?
So the first bike I had that wasn't a hand-me-down was this sweet BMX bike. And picture old BMX bikes where they'd run the brake cables down through the front stem there so you could do a full 360 with the handlebars. Oh, I love that bike. And then somebody stole it out of my family's garage, and that burned me up. But my next bike was a blue Schwinn trail runner. It's kind of like my first mountain bike kind of thing. And from there, I progressively got cooler and cooler mountain bikes. And I used to have a lot of fun riding my bike in the woods.
Thank you. All right, we're going to start the first question, and Dan will start at that end. We're going to do these alphabetical. So the first question is the bike question. The City Council recently passed a climate action plan that calls for 30 miles of protected bikeways by 2020, but recent debates over building protected bike infrastructure have been discouraging. Do you agree with this goal, and how would you work with the county to ensure that we build bike infrastructure that works for everyone?
Well, I certainly do agree with
2
the
minutes.
goal, and I would do what we have always done when we have these city-county negotiations, and that is put the two sides together and work out a solution to it. But I see that the objective here is one that I am astonished that the county doesn't share with the city, if that is the county's position on it, because it seems to me to be a very worthwhile objective and one we want to carry through on.
Thank you. Bob?
Yes, thank you. This is a subject that's sort of near and dear to my heart because growing up, I really did ride a bike about every place I could imagine. The bike was sort of attached to me. And when I went to the U, except during the winter, and we didn't have the bike pass that you have today, I used to ride my bike every day to the U, used to ride it to work, wherever I worked in the summer. And I'm really into bike safety as a result. I know what it's like to have to hug the curb all the way and worry about people coming up from behind you, and we need these protected lanes. So I think the goal is really good. I think 6-7 years is long enough time to get together with the parties and try and figure out how we get more protected bike lanes. I think they are such an important issue. I took a lot of heat. I've been on the park board for 16 years, and probably about a little over a decade ago, we had an issue about separate bike and walking trails along the creek. We already had them around the lakes, and I was president of the board. I was getting a lot of, a lot of basically threats from people who lived along the creek that they didn't want to see if have two paths. Two paths were extremely important. And I didn't care what it was going to be. We were going to have two paths because we don't need bikes and walkers together. And I'm really concerned about a lot of the bike paths we have today that maybe come around traffic. You get on First Avenue North where you got cars that can open their doors or parking there. It can be a real problem. So I think it is a real priority to sit down, talk to the interested parties, and tell them how important it is that we have these protected lanes. It is extremely important. I understand it personally because, like I said, I was there. I've seen enough things that happened, and I have been hit by a car on my bike. So I got my bike fixed.
Thank you, Betsy.
Well, yes, I support it. I voted for the Climate Action Plan in my role on the City Council, where I've been serving for 8 years. But I'll back up a minute. I have been pushing for all kinds of bike infrastructure for years now on the city council. And part of the reason I do that is because I know we need to build bicycle infrastructure for people like me. I am not your A-level cyclist cycling all year in the middle of traffic, weaving in and out, you know. That is not me. I'm the kind of person, and I go out and I test our bike infrastructure to see if someone like me feels more comfortable riding than not. That's my personal story. Even so, I've been an advocate for infrastructure. You know, when we were rebuilding the 35W bridge and they said we're not going to have a tunnel underneath for bikes, dear city, you have to find the money for it. I worked hard to find the money for that so that we can have that pathway. And so protected bikeways are important. Not everybody is a comfortable cyclist. Not everybody is going to want or need to be out in with cars, you know, nervous about having to hug the curb. And so on some of especially our most busy roadways, we're going to need some protected bikeways. I think that the fight on Washington has been a good one. But the question asked is, how do you work potentially with the county or other folks who may not share that value or share that goal? And I think one of the things we need to do is start with our own staff at the city. One of the things that I've done and that I've done in concert with my colleagues is push our own engineers to have that bigger vision and to think differently, which is sometimes a challenge to do. Because often these conversations with the county start between staff. The elected leaders make eventual decisions, but if those conversations happen well from staff to staff between the city and the county, things go better overall. And so that's one of the things we need to do, in addition to successfully advocating for that vision with our colleagues at the elected level.
Thank you. Cam?
So before I answer the question on protected bikeways specifically, let me provide a little context. As I think folks know, there are people in our city who are really hurting. There are neighborhoods in our city with 20% unemployment. Our apartment vacancy rate is at about 3%, which means that a lot of working class families just can't find a place to live in our city. And people have had their property taxes double in the past 10 years. So, with those facts as context, whenever somebody proposes, anybody from any community or advocacy group, whenever anybody proposes any new spending, I look at that request, that proposal, with healthy skepticism. I say, well, my default's going to be that we're already squeezed and the well's already dry, but let's look at evidence. Let's look at data, and I'm persuadable. I'm no ideologue. I'm persuadable by evidence and argument. And so I give great credit to the bicycling community for presenting me with evidence and with argument. In some cases, argumentative argument, in other cases, friendly argument. And I have been persuaded on a few fronts. So let me come around specifically to answer the question. On bike lanes, just striping a bike lane, easy peasy. Let's do it. Anytime we repave a road, stripe a bike lane right there. I was a bike commuter when it was remotely possible for me to be one, and I'll join with others in commuting by bicycle. On protected bike lanes, I'm case by case. On protected cycle tracks, I'm case by case. I have been persuaded that a Washington Avenue cycle track makes sense. I was persuaded that a Minnehaha Avenue cycle track made sense. I was disappointed when the county apparently nixed it. But I hope what's coming through is that I am open to evidence and argument, and the things I'll look at when looking at cycle tracks is what does it cost and how will it impact traffic flow. So on Washington Avenue, as long as we can have 5 lanes of traffic plus a cycle track, I'm absolutely fine with it. I support it.
Thank you. And Stephanie?
Great, thank you. Yes, I support the climate action plan, and similar to the Betsy, that I'm a cycler but not an avid cyclist. And actually, tonight I almost hopped on my bike because my car wouldn't start getting here. So how ironic is that, right? But coming to a transportation debate and my 15-year-old BMW won't start because it's damp outside. So I almost hopped on that bike if it wasn't raining. But anyway, yeah, I mean, you know, we've got to have some common sense here, but we have to put safety first in terms of, you know, looking at what makes sense. And I'm a huge proponent for cycle tracks. I live on Franklin between First and Stevens, and I personally would not ride down First Avenue I've seen cars, I've seen people get hit, and it's just not safe. I'm a huge proponent of the cycle tracks on Washington Avenue, and there's got to be a better way, because I don't believe that just by painting green paint on the highway is going to help somebody, specifically in the wintertime. So I think that we've got to kind of balance the needs and look at the overall cost, but we have to put safety first. And I'm not opposed to maybe partnering with some of the in the private sector to do this, to make it worthwhile and to make it safety. But it's just got to be an overall balance, and we've got to put safety first, because living around the uptown area, I've seen so many people get hit, and like I said, it's something that has to be addressed.
Thank you. All right, now before we have our next question, a couple things. Stragglers, please sit down. That would be nice. Have people come in and sit down. Take a moment. We've got folks here that have cards for you. At the end of our 5 questions, we will have a question for each candidate. You must circle just one name. If you're interested in getting one of these cards, put your hand up, and these nice folks will hand them out to you, and we'll pick them up after the 3rd question. Remember, you can ask a question to one candidate. They will aggregate them and decide which question gets asked of the candidate. And once we're all finished, candidates, you guys will have the chance for 2 minutes to make a concluding statement. So the next question that we have is on rail, and we're going to start with you, Bob Fine, and work our way to your left. And the rail question is, Minneapolis is investing much financial and political capital in light rail and streetcars. First, would you support giving municipal consent on the current shallow tunnel proposal for the Southwest LRT? Second, do you believe that Minneapolis should build a streetcar along Nicollet and Central? And if yes, how should that streetcar be funded? We'll start with you, Bob Fine.
Okay, thank you. This light rail issue, of course, hits especially strong because I'm on the park board, and obviously what's going to happen along the Kenilworth Trail is going to affect Cedar Lake and affect the lakes. Park board's already taken a position, which I have too, which was against we were against co-location of both the light rail and the freight rail, and we took a position against the shallow tunnel. We're worried about exactly how this is going to pan out and what's going to happen, and about whether the area can take it. The board itself also, but did approve a deep tunnel, which I opposed. I opposed the deep tunnel for a couple of reasons. One is the estimates are that it's going to be about $330 million, and I don't think that's such a great solution. But I think coupled with that is environmental considerations. Exactly, are we really certain about this area, which is really between 3 lakes, and we've got deep lakes around there, a lot of water. Is there going to be a geological problem? So the park board approved hiring a hydrologist. Now on the streetcar, I think it's a luxury that we can't afford. If it's going to cost $200 million, I do not believe it's actually going to bring business to have light rail that goes from the end of Nicollet Mall down to our wonderful Kmart store that blocks up Nicollet. I don't think it's at all going to bring business. I don't think it's going to have tourists who are going to want to be on that route. I found people up northeast who are against the Central Avenue, and I think it's something the city doesn't need to get involved with. It's much more expensive than it's worth. It sounds good. It's a nice luxury, but we can't afford it.
Thank you, Betsy.
Rail transit is at the heart of my vision for the future of Minneapolis for a whole host of reasons, because rails do bring economic development in a way that tires don't, because it helps guide the development that we want to bring here. I want to bring another 107,000 people to the city of Minneapolis. And if we do it right, people don't object to density of people. They object to density of cars. And so if we do it right with transit, we can bring a lot more people here, build and grow this city. So absolutely, I'm a supporter of Southwest LRT, and absolutely, I would have voted no on municipal consent if they had tried to put it before us. But thank you to Governor Dayton, who today said that he was going to slow this process down, give at least another 3 months to take a look at what the options are for Southwest, and that is what I had been calling for. I called the process almost scandalously flawed, given that promises were made very early on in 1997. I've said it before, and I would say it if he were here. Mark Andrew was the head of the HRA when the promise was made, the handshake deal was struck, but no contracts were signed for Southwest LRT and relocation. So that process has been flawed. Promises were made that have not been kept. And we've come to the point where the question is, if we're going to spend $1.5 billion on this rail line, are we putting it in the right place? You know, we took Nicollet off the table as the alternative because it would send a light rail train down Nicollet Mall. But the flip side is we weren't looking at Hennepin and Lyndale because they were expensive and complicated. Well, guess what? The current situation is expensive and complicated. Yes, thank you. Yes, I support streetcars. I believe the Value Capture District is a great tool. It's public money being invested in a public good, and I do believe that rails bring investment the way that tires won't.
Ken.
On Southwest Light Rail, I absolutely oppose any form of co-location. And so if the question comes back up when I'm the mayor starting next year, and it's shallow tunnel, I will lead all forces in denying municipal consent. It's too much burden on one community with no commensurate upside. I think folks know that the station that would have been in the Kenwood neighborhood has been nixed as a cost-saving measure. And so really what we're talking about is destroying pristine areas of Minneapolis to enable folks from Eden Prairie to commute to work more easily. No, is what I say to that. I'm proud to have been the first candidate to loudly say we need to reopen the locally preferred alternatives process with an eye towards using the 3C alignment, putting light rail down the Midtown Greenway, turning north and running it up Nicollet. I favor not running it down Nicollet Mall, but rather doing the loop up to the northwest as you look at the map of downtown, so that then would interline with the central line to St. Paul. And folks say, oh boy, you missed the boat, Winton. That decision was made in early 2010 to pick this locally preferred alternative, to which I say there's nothing binding about that. It was a vote of the Met Council, and a vote of the Met Council can reverse it, and on the current path we're on, we're not going to have a project. Minneapolis will deny municipal consent, even if the Met Council tried to supersede that. That's 10 years of litigation. So our choices really are 3C alignment or no project. On streetcars, let me note clearly that everyone up here is well-intentioned. Everyone up here wants the absolute best for our city. We just have differences of opinion about how to achieve that. So with great respect for my friend and fellow candidate, Councilmember Hodges, I am proud that the Star Tribune has called me the most vocal opponent of the streetcar. I think that we can achieve our transit goals of moving people from A to B by enhancing our bus lines. $2 million per mile gets you heated bus stations with pay machines in them and digital signboards for the folks who can't afford smartphones. That's a transit system that's a bargain compared to the $54 million per mile of the streetcar. And for every study that's out there saying that a streetcar catalyzes economic development, I can show you another that says it's not. And so since the economic development arguments are a draw, I favor the $2 million per mile bus over the streetcar.
We move on now. Stephanie.
Great, thank you. This is probably not the most popular response, but I actually would give consent for the Southwest Light Rail. I find it hard to believe that over the course of 7+ years that the entire Met Council and the engineers got this one wrong. Now, sometimes as a mayor, you have to make difficult decisions, and you have to look at and consider the entire region. And from the research that I've done on this entire line, they're proposing something like 60,000 new residents, 60,000 new jobs and commuters. Well, you know what? I want those 60,000 new residents to live downtown Minneapolis, that can go to work at UHG, Super Value, the entire corridor down to Eden Prairie. I want those young kids to live downtown Minneapolis. I want them to be able to get on the train, go to work all day, come back, take the train, land downtown, go out for dinner, drink, whatever they want to do, get up and do it the next day. If we don't do this, we risk losing $625 million of the federal money, right? And where are all those new jobs? Those folks are probably going to move to Hopkins, St. Louis Park, Eden Prairie. Sometimes difficult decisions have to be made, then you have to put the region first. Now, with that, I would definitely then look at streetcar options down Hennepin, right? Or the Midtown Greenway to connect with Southwest Light Rail. But we have got to take a regional focus on rail, or we will not grow this city. It's impossible, right? If we want an extra 100,000 people living in this city and 70,000 downtown, unless we can connect the suburbs, it's just not going to happen. Now, for the streetcar line, I totally oppose. I'm for streetcars, but I'm opposed to how this deal was put together in terms of diverting $60 million, $6 million over 10 years, versus true revenue capture.
Thank you. The next question, we're going to start with Betsy. Oh, pardon me. Yes, Dan. Sorry.
That's okay.
I
That's okay.
couldn't see past the crowd here.
Okay, no problem. No co-location, and there is actual flooding now, even as we speak. There's an apartment development on Knox and Calhoun Boulevard that has had its basement flooded. There are pumps out there right now. They're pumping the water into the lagoon of all places. This is not going to work. The mayor is right. The geological problems here, I believe, are insurmountable, but we're going to have studies that will confirm that, in my opinion. I am very sympathetic to the suggestion that Cam has made with regard to the Midtown Greenway. I think that has real possibilities. Now, streetcars. This is an expensive toy that, in my opinion, is very ill-advised. The only basis on which I could support it would be if somehow this was the arrow that would pierce the back of the Kmart and drive and open it up Nicollet Avenue finally from Lake Street to 42nd Street. Otherwise, it's no-go on the streetcars.
Thank you. The next question is about pedestrians and equity. An increasing number of Minneapolis residents, including many of my students and former students, and including a large proportion of non-white households in Minneapolis, do not own a car and instead depend on transit to get around. This has tremendous implications for racial and economic equity. How would you make sure that people who don't own cars have access to jobs and other important destinations in Minneapolis and the region? Betsy, we'll start with you.
Well, transit is one of the tools we have at our disposal to create some more equity in the city. One of the reasons that transit's at the heart of my vision for the future of Minneapolis is because it can bring that kind of equity. Because we have some of the biggest gaps between white people and people of color of any city in the country. Housing, health, employment, education, and we are one of the most geographically divided, which means that the transit options we have, if they are different in one part of the city from another, are inherently going to have an equity impact on one part of the city to another. And so one of the reasons that I look to building our city based on the common ground and the public good. I believe that to really grow this city well, we have to do it based on the common ground. Investments in the public good, building the city that people choose to come to and choose to live in. And when you build the city based on the common ground, it's common. Which means if you build transit in the city of Minneapolis, you can build transit throughout the city of Minneapolis. And if you build streetcar lines, you can build them throughout the city of Minneapolis, including a streetcar line on West Broadway. So one of the things we have to do is have mass transit. That's crucial, and have it from top to bottom, from stem to stern, light rail, streetcars, buses, bus rapid transit, biking, walking, the whole 9 yards. And that's why I've been an advocate for all levels of that transit and transportation my entire time on the council. Now, one of the key pieces to that, and I think you mentioned it at the beginning, is the pedestrian access. The more we have people going to bus stops, going to train stations, the more people are going to be walking there, the more people are going to be biking there, which is why it's so important that we have those amenities as well. And when we were talking about the Botno line, just one final sentence, when we were talking about the Botno line, and I worked, and full disclosure, my husband's on the Met Council, talking about the West Broadway line, we also made the deal to do something right away with the 5 and the 18 buses.
Thank you. Kim?
Sure. I think Councilmember Hodges did a nice job of sketching out why a transit system that's robust and works for everyone is essential to keeping our city moving forward and thriving. She and I disagree a little bit on some of the details. As I mentioned, I do not favor using a streetcar as part of our transit mix. I do favor strongly enhancing our existing bus routes. I mentioned the heated bus stations with pay machines in them so that people can pay before they get on board and thereby enter and exit through both doors. It speeds the process significantly. And putting those digital signboards in the heated bus stations. $2 million per mile is a real enhancement that will enable people to get around more easily. Biking enhancements, I've already discussed in a previous answer, how I support striping a bike lane whenever we repave a road. And on a case-by-case basis, I'm open to protected cycle tracks. On pedestrian facilities, I'll admit, before I got into this campaign, I'm a tall guy with a healthy stride. I frankly had never had to think about the fact that for some people it's difficult to get across the street before the white walk person turns to a red don't walk person. And so it was instructive to me to learn that the city has done some great work on lengthening walk times, on building out curbs, on making crosswalks more visible. And it's simple enhancements like that that really are part of strengthening our transit network. Since the frame of the question was regarding jobs, let me also note that at the same time we're building a transit network to enable people to get to jobs, we need to be doing work to make sure there are jobs there for people to get to. I do respect the service of my fellow candidates here. I note that I'm the one candidate on the stage not coming from a background as an elected or an appointed official in City Hall. My colleagues and I built a business that maintains wind turbines across the country. So based on that background, I have some thoughts on how we can cut red tape coming out of City Hall to make it easier for companies to start here and grow here so that job growth is bubbling up in our neighborhoods rather than trying to do large public works projects like the ill-advised Viking Stadium to achieve the job growth we need.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Yeah, this issue is near and dear to my heart. A few years ago, right before I lost my house in a foreclosure and I sold everything I owned to keep my company going, I actually didn't have a car for a year, and I lived off of 49th and Bryant. So I used to take the number 46 bus all the time to get down to City Hall as I serve as an appointed official. So I serve as a volunteer, non-paid position as your internal watchdog as the mayor's appointee on the audit committee. And I frequently take the number 17 bus. I live on Franklin and Nicollet, and I'll take the number 2C bus on Franklin to the Franklin station to go to the airport. So all of my time that I've spent in North Minneapolis, it's truly unacceptable that we don't have enough transit up there to move people to their jobs. And I seem to be the only opponent talking about development on the north side. We need to further invest in our river and develop areas like we have the Upper Harbor Terminal, where we have 48 acres of already owned land, right, in a depressed neighborhood that we've got to make these investments. But it's got to be smart investments so it's sustainable to create sustainable living wage careers and make transit decisions that are smart, not a $60 million streetcar for 3.2 miles down Nicollet Avenue, but transit that's actually going to move people to their jobs to increase our tax base, right, and get people where they need to go. We can do that easily by enhancing bus service, right? But we've got to, we can't look at these problems in a vacuum. We've got to look at everything together. Jobs, transit to make sure it's sustainable. That will lift people out of poverty. That should help us close the achievement gap. And we need to do that in a very transparent and open way so that every neighborhood feels empowered and they know exactly what's going on with city government.
Thank you. Dan?
The mayor says that 90% of our transit needs are being met by buses. The Star Tribune says 85% of our transit needs are being met by buses. We don't need streetcars to fill that very small fractional difference. It can be filled by buses, but different kinds of buses than the big behemoths that we're sending down the streets now. We can use small 15-passenger buses, low-emission buses, buses that can travel on neighborhood streets easily, buses that will go off at very rapid schedules every 5 minutes or so. These are the kinds of buses that can fill the transit gap that we have now. And I credit this suggestion to a civil engineer who is one of the absent 35 from this group. His name is Bob Carney. He runs in these elections a lot of times. but he has some good ideas, and I think this is one of them. So I think that is a way to address our transit needs, and I suggest we follow through on it.
Thank you. And Bob?
Yes, thank you. Transportation is obviously an important issue for people to get around, and isn't just jobs, it's just how we get around and how we get to places that we need to go. So it is a really important issue, and there's a number of things to consider. I think light rail is very important. One of the issues that's going to come up with light rail is the fact that if the Southwest light rail is too expensive, is it going to affect the Botno line, which is going to go out to the northwest? That will help downtown Minneapolis. I think it'll help business. Ultimately, it'll help jobs, and it'll produce more jobs. And I think we live in sort of a nice area. I've been to a lot of cities where you don't have a central downtown the way this is, where people come from all different directions. So it's really important that we enhance the buses. I think that having streetcars does not improve the situation at all. That if there's any money that's going to be spent, we should be talking, frankly, about enhancing the bus system and making it more accessible. So how are we going to do that? I think we need to sort of talk to the community about that, to talk to affected areas and find out what it is they need, where it is they need it, because frequently government does things in a vacuum where they don't go out and talk to the community, they don't find out what it is that they need, where they want to go, and sometimes ultimately they build a highway and divide neighborhoods, and they do all sorts of other things. So I think, talking to the community, finding out where and how we better provide bus transportation is very important, and each time I've tried to beat the bell.
Thank you. So we finished our third question. If you have written out a question that you want to pose to one of the candidates, if you could pass it to the aisle, we will have some volunteers come and pick those up. If there are folks in the back and they want to come in and sit down, we've got space up here towards the front, so come on in and sit down. All right, the intermission's over here. We're going to move on. The parking question, and we're going to start with you, Cam. Decades after urban renewal cleared much of downtown's building stock, downtown is still full of parking lots, at least 140 according to the Star Tribune. The city's goal is to increase population and decrease driving, yet current zoning rules require parking spaces for new developments. Do you think Minneapolis should reduce minimum parking requirements for new developments and take steps to decrease the number of surface parking lots in downtown Minneapolis?
Minneapolis should entirely eliminate minimum parking requirements. I've always wanted to do a mic drop for real, and I thought... Bucket list checks. Did I break it? Okay, good, it's on. And furthermore, like probably everybody else up here, I do think that we should take I think we should take quite a few steps to make it so that people want to build buildings or parks or something on the parking lots that blight downtown. But as folks probably know, given the nice study that was commissioned recently, the people who own those parking lots, again, you have to remember, everybody in all these thick policy discussions is probably well-intentioned. Those parking lot owners aren't trying to stick it to anybody. They want a revenue stream that they can pass on to their children, and we can't fault them for that. And so we have to think of win-win solutions, solutions that will enable those parking lot owners to make money by selling that land to a developer who wants to put up buildings on it. I encourage you to Google Cam Winton tortoise, and you'll see a press conference I did recently where I posed with a real live tortoise. It was awesome. And a hare out in front of our public service center where we regulate businesses and developers. Now, side note, the hare was really more of a bunny rabbit, but you try finding a hare on Craigslist. It's not easy. So anyway, I posed in front of the public service center with my tortoise and my hare to say that currently we regulate developers at the pace of the tortoise. We need to regulate it at the pace of the hare. And in this story, it's the hare who's going to win. We have to streamline our building process, our building code process. our code enforcement process, because when we do that, we will make Minneapolis a more appealing place for people to come and invest capital and build buildings. And that's going to be the key way that we get those surface parking lot owners to part with that land so we can build something there.
Thank you. Stephanie?
I think my opponent has too much time on his hands. Could have called me. I had an extra hair. You could have had. Yeah. Get it? No, come on. No, come on. You know, should I drop the mic now? I'm here all week. No, no, I agree. I mean, 130 surface parking lots have got to go. I mean, we've got to create win-win solutions. And echoing what Cam said, I mean, you know, the owners of these lots, obviously it's their business, so we can't, you know, obviously drive them out. But we've got to come up with common solutions, common sense solutions so that everybody wins, so that we encourage development, right? But we don't need, on the far end, the city of Minneapolis doesn't need to be in the parking rent business. So, you know, I totally oppose what we're doing with the Rhine development, right, in terms of spending, you know, between a parking ramp and a yard, almost $65 million when we're trying to encourage transit, right? We're trying to get cars off the road. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of opportunities downtown that we need to partner with folks, but we need to create win-win by removing the zoning, making it so that everybody wins, so that we, you know, further develop downtown, so it's smart decisions, so it's transit-oriented design, whether it's affordable housing, you know, new development, whatever. But it's a huge opportunity, and that will be one of my first priorities when I become mayor, to make sure that everybody wins in that process.
Thank you.
We can't let zoning drive the market. The market has to drive the zoning. And your applause on the parking issue proves that what we need to do is have zoning that reflects the belief that too much parking, too many cars are the enemy of development in downtown Minneapolis. Now, the way to do something about that, and we're starting to do it, is in some of the zoning decisions we have recently made, is to reduce the minimum requirement for residential housing in Minneapolis down to now 390 feet. Now, that may just sound like a number to you, but it reflects the changes in lifestyles which are taking place now. Women want careers. They don't get married as early as they used to. They want to have their own place. Other people with changing different lifestyles want to have their own places too. They want their own places because 40% of the population of this city is now single-family households. And these single-family households living downtown don't have the same demand for cars that there used to exist down there. So we're going in the right direction. We're getting the kind of zoning that we need in order to incorporate the lifestyles, the standards of the people that are moving to Minneapolis, and we're getting a growing population along with it because we're meeting the demands of people to have these kind of smaller units that give them the kind of freedom and lifestyle that they want to have. That's part of the program of the city of Minneapolis now, and it's something we have to continue to develop.
Could I just ask you to repeat the question?
I will
again?
repeat the question. Decades after urban renewal cleared much of downtown's building stock, downtown is still full of parking lots, at least 140, according to the Star Tribune. The city's goal is to increase population and reduce driving, yet current zoning rules require parking spaces for new developments. Do you think Minneapolis should reduce minimum parking requirements for new developments and take steps to decrease surface parking lots?
Well, this whole question goes back to something that I've really been interested in, which is that we take a look overall at not only our zoning, but our planning for the city and take a close look at what we're doing and think about what we're doing. I think the question begs the answer, which is, yes, we shouldn't have minimum parking requirements in many places, because I think what we should be encouraging is if we're going to have development downtown, we get a lot of people who want to get rid of their car. We're going to offer, hopefully someday we'll have an orchestra again downtown. We might have a football team. Dan would like to see it go away. We may have a
owner, Bob.
I'm
the owner.
I'm just kidding. And the, you know, we have a baseball team. We got the wonderful Guthrie Theater. We got all sorts of other
got
arts
Kmart,
and things.
too,
And,
don't forget.
you know, but not downtown. I hope we don't ever end up with a Kmart and we block off the Nicollet Mall for it. But the, you know, I think we have to take a look at, you know, the fact we have all these lots, they're an eyesore. Being this park person most of my life, I'd love to see a number of them turn into parks, but I'm realistic about whether that's not going to happen without an awful lot of financial assistance somewhere along the way. And I could go into that for hours. But we want to encourage development. We want to encourage development so we get the kind of people that, you know, are going to get rid of their cars. Their life is going to be downtown. They're going to be able to take transit wherever they go. And we've got to sort of change the way we're thinking, because a lot of our old zoning, I used to be on the zoning board, a lot of the way we have our plans for the city and how we're encouraging development is old style, and we need to look at present day and the way things should work.
Thank you. Betsy.
So I am in my second term on the city council, and in my first term especially, I would always get this question: what was the most surprising thing for you about being on the city council? Like when you started, what was the most surprising thing about being in office? And it took me a while to realize that the genuine answer to that question is the amount of time I spend talking about parking. Everything we do parking gets talked about. When we do a road project, when a new development comes in, when a restaurant opens, parking is a huge, huge conversation in the city of Minneapolis. And I support transit for a whole host of big picture vision reasons for the city. I think part of the reason I support transit is because the more we have, the less I have to talk about parking. And I spent the last year actually talking about how to redevelop downtown East in downtown Minneapolis. It's a huge opportunity. I opposed the Viking Stadium. You know, I was an opponent of it. But when it became clear that this deal was going to happen, I signed on to make it happen as well as possible for the city of Minneapolis. If we are going to make this investment, I want it to go as well as possible. I don't think stadiums generate new development very well, but I want to spend time doing the best we can. And so I was the only opponent on the Stadium Implementation Committee and spent the last year talking about a vision for downtown East. We had a lot of vision. If this stadium is going to be a catalyst for that, so be it. But I think a lot of the reason we're going to be able to enact our vision for downtown East, and what I mean by that is redevelop the surface parking lots, get more density there, get people, get business, get growth right there in downtown East. It's an unparalleled opportunity for a downtown of any major city. Part of the reason we're going to be able to do that is because there's transit there. Let's not forget, Central Corridor is coming in. We have Hiawatha. The access to that is one of the reasons that employers are going to want to be in downtown East. It's one of the reasons I believe that Ryan Companies is there. So
Thank you.
yes, we need to change the zoning so we can develop downtown.
Kim. Oh, sorry.
I can talk more if you want.
No, that's okay.
Ready
Yeah.
to go second time around.
Yeah,
Say
the second-
more nice things about what the city did for pedestrians.
All right, we're going to start now with the last question before we get to your individual ones, which is the pothole question. Many people feel that Minneapolis roads are crumbling while the city spends millions on boondoggles. Insert your very own in your own mind. How would you, as mayor, ensure that roads, bridges, sidewalks, and trails are properly maintained for all users? And we'll start with Dan.
Last week, a federal judge in Duluth awarded the city of Duluth $10 million in back rental from the Chippewas who had not been paying that rental fee to the city for their downtown casino. As many of you may not realize, we have had a downtown casino in the state of Minnesota since 1986, the Fondue Luth Casino in Duluth. And when the mayor heard about this decision, he said, $10 million. I'll tell you what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to fix the streets in the city of Duluth, starting with the one right in front of that casino. So if you're interested in getting your streets fixed, if you're interested in getting money that you don't have to pay to the state or to Ziggy Welf or to anybody else but can keep for yourself, you might take a second look or a closer look at having a downtown casino, which is a tax-paying engine that can pay a lot of the bills that that you as taxpayers are going to otherwise have to face.
Thank you, Bob.
I'm not sure what the question is anymore, but
The question
I know
is-
it is. How do we get rid of our potholes? What do we do about our streets? and
What do we do
things?
about our roads, bridges, sidewalks, and trails that they're properly maintained?
Frankly, I'm not a big person on casinos because I got real concerns with it, but I like to see them show up. Maybe they belong in the potholes. I'll bring up one sort of interesting thing. You know, we're known for the potholes in our streets. Anybody who's grown up in here my whole life, all I think about is potholes, how it destroys cars. But I took a geology course at the university, and we have, I think, the biggest potholes in the world. And I'm not talking about streets. They're in, I believe it's called Interstate Park over on the St. Croix. And they have these gigantic potholes. And the funniest thing to me is, well, I already knew we had the biggest potholes in the world, but these, of course, were geologically formed by what was the River Agassiz, I believe, that used to flow down from Lake Superior into this area. Is that the wrong name? It was a glacial Lake Agassiz. Yeah.
Mr. Fine?
Okay, anyway.
How would you fix the infrastructure in
Anyways,
Minneapolis?
I really think we should be, well, I didn't want to get into casinos and about the mayor of Duluth, so I thought I would do that. I really believe that we should be spending a lot of money on our infrastructure. You know, the fact that we would fund a Viking Stadium is just appalling when we got a lot of work on our streets. And, you know, I know from biking and from driving, it's terrible what we have out there. We need to fix our streets. We need it to be long-term. We need to spend a lot of time on it. And I think that's really important, and get rid of those potholes, and we shouldn't be known as having the biggest potholes in the world.
Betsy?
Well, I'm currently on the city council and have had to make a series of tough decisions over the last 8 years about how we spend our money. And I understand how weird it looks to people when you see us doing capital projects and then you see there are potholes in the street. And some of those capital projects I've agreed with, some of them I haven't. But the truth remains that those capital projects are paid for out of a whole different set of money than we pay for potholes. And so I'm chair of the Ways and Means Budget Committee. I am doing my best to refrain from giving a long speech about how the budget works. But I'll just say this. We have one pot of money that we can use to pay for road repair, police, and fire. And that one pot of money mostly goes to road repair, police, and fire. So the choice we've been making as a council is whether or not to fund public safety or potholes. And as RT says, and I've been proud to be a partner with him, putting more money into pothole repair, putting more money into our infrastructure. He says the reason there are potholes on your street is because we've made them safer to walk down. That's been the trade-off, is public safety, because we were under siege by the state in terms of taking away the money that we use to pay for road repair, local government aid. And the only other option we had is property taxes, and that's a whole other conversation. That being said, as we've moved forward, we have put more money into pothole filling. I'm proud to have voted for that more than once, to put additional funds into potholes. As soon as we had those funds available to us, we put it into fixing potholes, because basic services are the basic things we need to expect from our city and from our city government. We also need to expect fire protection and public safety and police response and 911 as well. And it's insane to me that we've ever had to make that trade-off. And that's why I've been such an advocate at the state level for local government aid, and why I've worked so hard to make sure that our property taxes are as low as they can be.
Kim?
So I mentioned my Tortoise press conference. I'd also encourage you to check out online my first press conference in this campaign, which I gave standing in a pothole. Put out the word on social media for people to send in their worst pothole. And there was a doozy in the southwest corner of Lake Calhoun. And I stood in it, the middle of the road. And it was kind of fun to have the reporters from the various outlets in town and I all dodging traffic as we stood in the middle of the intersection. And my point, of course, was that as a city, we do need to devote the money to keep up our basic infrastructure. There aren't too many problems in the world that you can solve by spending more money on them, but road repair is one of them. You can pay for the asphalt and pay people to patch the roads with it. And I hope folks recognize that when I talk about road repair, it is not simply for the benefit of people driving in cars. It's for all users of the roads. I talk to Metro Transit bus drivers who say one of the main reasons they have difficulty keeping to the bus schedules is that they're weaving around potholes or delayed by traffic jams caused by people weaving around potholes. I speak to bicyclists who have a heck of a time getting from A to B and have broken a whole lot of rims or bent a whole lot of rims because of the poor quality of our roads. As folks may know, the metric you use is called the Pavement Condition Index, and while I really do like Mayor Rybeck, and he's overall been a fantastic mayor, for the first many years of Mayor Rybeck's term, our paving condition index declined. And then it plateaued in the basement, and then it went up a little tick. We have about 975 miles of road in the city. A city should repave its roads on a 15-year cycle, meaning once every 15 years you repave all your roads, or each year you repave 1/15. Means you should repave about 68 miles of road a year. We're not keeping up with that. Right now we're at about 25 to 30. It fluctuates. When I'm mayor, we will put at least $20 million per year towards road maintenance. That gets you about 100 miles of road per year paved. And so we can keep up with where we need to keep up and put our paving condition index back in an upward trajectory.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Yeah, this issue is bigger than just potholes. This is about our entire crumbling infrastructure called our neighborhoods. The Viking deal that we just did, $150 million for stadium construction, and another $189 million for ongoing maintenance, which is about $6 million from the Target Center entertainment taxes, which comes from our general fund. The $65 million for the Ryan development, which is a parking ramp and a yard. Once again, we should not be socializing the downside and privatizing the upside. The $60 million, right? $6 million for 10 years for a streetcar line that doesn't advance our transit. All of these projects, right, are putting projects over people. This is the number one issue I'm running, to put people over politics, people over projects. We've got crumbling infrastructure. We've got crumbling neighborhoods. We've got people that are out of work. We have 1 in 4 living in poverty, which is 37% higher than the national average. We've got the worst achievement gap in America. This is bigger than potholes. And I would hope that you're not hiring me as your next mayor to think about potholes. This is about priorities. This is about having a vision to make Minneapolis the smartest city in America, to get back to the neighborhoods and to empower our neighborhoods to put people first. That's the only way we're going to solve our pothole issue. We know it's going to take money, and granted, $20 million, if we had it, let's do it. But how are we going to come up with $20 million? I don't know. I mean, that's a lot of money if you think about, given all of these projects that we've just signed on for, and none of them advance and lift people out of poverty. We've got to put people first, and that's why I'm running for mayor.
Thank you. Now we have individual questions for the candidates that have been generated by the audience. And Stephanie, we'll start with you. You mentioned that you didn't approve the value capture mechanism for funding the Nicollet Central streetcar. How would you design a value capture plan to fund a transit project that you saw as vital? If you don't support value capture, how will you fund transit?
Yeah, no, I completely support value capture. It's that this deal that put together is not a true value capture. In my mind, this is tax diversion, because it's taking the taxes of those units that are already in development, right? So to me, true value capture is when you lay the rail and then new development happens and you actually capture the tax from those properties. I'm totally for value capture. It's just that for the Nicollet streetcar line, right, a special kind of TIF, which is really accounting trickery, to name it value capture is not really value capture. Call it what it is. It's tax diversion. If that's the way we're going to finance it, then just call it what it is. I don't have a problem with that. But I'm all for value capture if it's done right, if the development is done right. If you lay the track and development happens, then let's capture those taxes to pay for that development. But let's not divert it and call it revenue capture.
Thank you. Cam, given the city's goals for mode shift on transit, we'll need to attract, Choice, thank you. I think we figured out who wrote this one. We'll need to attract choice riders to the bus. Tell me how you'd convince a non-transit dependent person to take the bus.
I'm blanking on the name of President Obama's Federal Transit Administration leader, the administrator, but I bet someone in this room. That wasn't the name I was thinking, but okay. I bet you're right. I'm not saying you're wrong. Whoever it was, Google this to check it. He said, paint is cheap. Paint is cheap. And I'm paraphrasing the rest of his quote. Rail sure sounds nice. And people say they want rail. But if you paint a bus and make it an enhanced bus with the other things I said, remember heated bus stops with pay machines and digital signboards in them, it gets the job done. That's President Obama's Federal Transit Administration leader who said that. That's where we have to go. The well is dry. No one up here has bad intentions. No one's trying to stick it to anybody else. But I'm recognizing the reality that there's no money left. Unfortunately, the city leaders have tied our hands with a Viking stadium that's going to cost our city $675 million when you factor in the interest costs over 20 years. That's just the city taxpayers portion. It's an abomination. It's terrible. But unfortunately, the deed is done. And we look at all the other decisions that have been made, our hands are tied. And so as you're considering whom to vote for mayor, I guarantee you I won't always tell you what you want to hear, but I guarantee you I will always call it as I see it. I will play it straight. And I hope you'll respect that candor. Because what we need to have, if we're going to build a robust transit network that's multimodal and does attract choice riders and enables economic growth and people to get from A to B, we're going to need to have candid discussions about what's possible and what we can't afford at this time. And I look forward to having that ongoing discussion as the next mayor.
Thank you. Here's a question for Betsy. Given the connection between transportation and land uses, how would you specifically increase the population of Minneapolis?
Well, I mean, I think part of the vision for transit is about bringing people here. Increasingly, people are choosing where they want to live before they choose anything else, before they get a job. They say, I want to live in Minneapolis, so I'm going to move there and get a job, but before they say, oh, I got a job in Minneapolis, I'm going to move there. And one of the things that draws people to cities right now, especially younger people, the kind of folks that we want moving in, coming here, staying here for a lifetime, is transit, and whether or not people can live without a car. And one of the key things that we need to do is create a city where it's very easy for people to live without a car. And I think that's what we've been talking about here tonight. What that does, though, when you have transit lines, especially rail lines, that people are, that helps drive the development. It helps drive the growth. It brings people to those lines. It brings people to jobs. It brings people to their jobs. It also brings jobs to people as you do development along those lines. One of the things that it does, and I'll just say again, for rail, there's a confidence that investors have developing around a rail line they know will be there in a generation that they don't have around buses. With all due respect, I think I'm the only person up here supporting streetcars. Buses have not been shown to be good economic development generators. They just haven't. Streetcars have. People are more confident investing around rails than they are around tires. They're not just transit. And what that allows you to do when you invest in rails and you invest in your entire transit system is do horizontal development. You can develop all along the rail line. It's not just vertical development. It helps ease the pressure on some of those neighborhoods that right now are so feeling so overburdened. You can do the horizontal development. It puts it where you want. It puts the development where you want it to go. It helps ease up that friction that neighborhoods feel with development. Not that it would go away. That's how you grow the city of Minneapolis.
Thank you. Bob Fine. Please tell us how you understand how the city's and regional transportation system can help meet our environmental, especially stormwater goals and needs.
Could you state that one more time? So
Yep. I didn't write this question,
I
just so you know.
realize you didn't. I figured you weren't up there writing.
Now, please tell us how you understand how the city's and regional transportation system can help meet our environmental, especially stormwater goals and needs.
Well, I'm not exactly sure. I'm not exactly sure how to answer that, but I have a little bit of a problem when I think of the whole issue of transit, and that is we've been, the Met Council, we've been doing this a long time. We keep building out in the cities, and Minneapolis probably only represents 10% in population of this whole metro area. And yet we keep building out, keep building more highways and go out farther and farther. I think I believe that's part of the problem with all of our highways and about spreading out. We need to sort of come in more. And I think environmentally it would probably help the systems if we start discouraging this building out and going farther out, and we're looking at coming in more, because I believe that's where the city of Minneapolis is going to grow. It's going to grow from coming in and not building out so much more. But I'm not sure what else to answer on that. So.
All right, thank you. And finally, Dan, as mayor, what kind of relationship would you have with transit engineers and planners?
Good one. I'm in the planning game right now. I'm on the Minneapolis Planning Commission, and I have strong feelings about the need for developing our transit. I'm talking in terms, however, of using buses, small buses, 15-passenger buses, 15-passenger low-emission buses, buses that can move through neighborhoods quickly, not big behemoth buses, and buses that'll go in 5-minute schedules so people can get where they're going very quickly. That's a transit concept which I think that transit planners and city planners can be supportive of. And I hope they are, because that's a plan I would like to carry out.
Thank you. We've reached the end of our questions, but we're going to give each candidate a chance for 2 minutes to sort of summarize some of their positions. I just want to recognize that we have an audience here that has been drawn together by some really great organizations that are sponsoring this event. We have very strong organizations in the Twin Cities that are looking at urban design, that are looking at transit, that are looking at walkability and bikeability, and they sponsored this event. The Alliance for Metropolitan Stability, the Minneapolis Bicycle Coalition, Streets MN, Urban MSP, the Interdisciplinary Transportation Student Association here at the University of Minnesota, and the Minnesota Urban Studies Student Association. Each of you are going to have 2 minutes to give us a sort of a little summary of your positions. It could be about transit, that's your audience here, but I'll let you choose your own way to go here. And Cam, we're going to start with you.
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity to have a great discussion tonight. I appreciate it. As I said, I'm the one candidate on the stage not coming from a background of being an elected or appointed official. I'm offering fresh eyes in City Hall. I'm fiscally responsible, I'm socially inclusive, and I'm offering an independent voice. I love our city. I wasn't born here. I got here as soon as I could. I was born in Philadelphia, raised in the suburbs of Philly. Well, since I'm speaking to a planning crowd, I should be more precise. I was raised in a college town in a sea of suburbs. And there really was a difference with the sidewalks we had. Incredible tree canopy, pedestrian access, walk score of 1 million before they even had walk scores. Swarthmore, Pennsylvania was a neat place to grow up. Then along the way, I met a Minnesotan, married her, and of course, if you marry a Minnesotan, here we are. And I practiced law at a law firm for a bit, and then had the opportunity to join a plucky little wind turbine maintenance company. And I'm proud of the fact that along with my colleagues, we built that company to have 120 employees, as I said earlier, maintaining wind turbines. Last year, we did business in 33 states and 4 countries. We sold ourselves to Duke Energy last year, the largest utility in the country. Every single one of our 120 employees kept their jobs and shared in the benefits of the sale. I still work for Duke today. And I'm drawing on that background to do a few key things as mayor to address the big challenges we face. One, make it easier for private sector businesses to start and grow companies here in Minneapolis. That's mom and pop, convenience stores, everything up to Fortune 500 companies. We need more jobs in our city, and I'll help make it happen. Two, restore the balance between property taxes paid in and services we receive, because we need people to want to move here and stay here. And three, push hard on education reform. We didn't touch that tonight, but it's hugely important to achieve the goal we all share of a thriving, robust city.
Thank you.
Cam Winton, and I appreciate your interest. Thank you.
Stephanie.
Yes, I'm running to put people over politics. I've never run for office before. I've got a 30-year career in business, corporate America, and I currently serve as an appointed official, which is a volunteer, non-paid position, as the mayor's appointee as vice chair of the audit committee, and I'm serving in my second term, and I'm proud to say that I've, have served that all on my own dime, and I'm honored to serve the mayor and city council in that position. Why did I jump into the race? I jumped in late because I just didn't see that my opponents are putting people first, right? Three things. We need to make sure that Minneapolis has sustainable growth, that we're creating living wage careers, and that our transit decisions improve livability of our neighborhoods. I haven't seen that so far with some of our proposals. Now, to correct somebody, I am a fan of streetcars. I'm just not a fan of how this streetcar proposal is financed because it doesn't advance our transit issue. Secondly, I'm running to make Minneapolis the smartest city in America. If we become the smartest city, that is our largest economic advantage to close that achievement gap and lift our neighborhoods out of poverty. 1 in 4 in poverty is unacceptable in Minneapolis. And thirdly, I'm running to make sure that we have an open and transparent government, period. Unacceptable that we have a D- rating from the U.S. Public Interest Research Group, that we do not provide that information, checkbook level spending, for our residents and empower our neighborhoods. I know I'm an underdog. I've never run before. I'm a proud Democrat, and I am the only candidate endorsed by a major party, and I have the endorsement of the Independence Party because we both share the vision to put people over politics. I'm Stephanie Woodruff, and I ask you for your vote, and I know because I jumped in late, if you've already made up your mind, then make your second choice, because that's the beauty and the power of ranked choice voting. Choice is power. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan.
We got the vote in same-sex marriage. We got the vote in voter ID. But a $500 million deal came along, and the big shot said, you don't get the vote in that one. You just get the bill. You get the shaft. That's wrong, and that will not stand, and I will put an end to it. I will see to it that if we're going to have a stadium deal, we are going to get a vote on that deal. I support a downtown casino because I think it's a jobs machine, it's a tax-paying machine. We have downtown casinos in this state. They work. This will work for us. You don't have to do the gambling. Let the tourists do the gambling. Let somebody else do the gambling if you don't like it. And in fact, there doesn't even have to be a downtown casino for us to get paid. They paid $75 million, the Mendoacan Sioux, $75 million, so the Canterbury wouldn't lobby over at the state legislature. Imagine how much they pay not to have a downtown casino in Minneapolis. That's part of the deal. I'm proud to be part of the group here that's asking for your support. I think they're outstanding. I think any one of them would make a good mayor someday. But I'm ready now, so I'm asking for your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob.
Yes, thank you. I've been on the Minneapolis Park Board for 16 years, and during that time I've been on the city's Board of Investment Taxation, which deals with which approves the bond financing, and we set the maximum tax rate. So I've had a lot of exposure. I've not been full-time, although my wife thinks that's what I spend all my time with these kind of things. I mean, basically, you know, we're an evening meeting group is what the park board is, but we do a lot. And it's really important, and I've gotten sort of a close view of the way things operate. I look at the disparity that we have in taxes, frankly, in Minneapolis. And I look at my own kids being able to afford to live in the city. My grandson, who just started Minneapolis Public Schools, is the 5th generation in my family now to be in Minneapolis Public Schools. And I'm worried about what's going to happen to the city. Basically, in my neighborhood, we have I live in a nice neighborhood in Linden Hills. I grew up there. You can buy a home in my area, but it's a lot cheaper to live a few blocks away in Edina or St. Louis Park, and that's true of the whole city. We don't need this disparity. My proposal is I want to come in, streamline government. I believe that we can be a lot more efficient and provide the good kind of service that people expect in this city, getting our streets fixed, our potholes filled, our snow plowed, and I think we can reduce our taxes by 5%. In fact, this year, the mayor is proposing to reduce it by 1%, but in fact, there's a lot of extra money that's come back to the state. And in effect, the city's actually spending $24 million more, and the decrease could be substantial. It's nice that might have the first decrease in 30 years. We will have the first decrease. But we could do a lot better and get rid of this disparity, and that will help transportation, because we need people to want to move in. Missed the bell this time, last time.
Thanks to the bike bell. And finally, Betsy Hodges.
Thank you, and thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. This is a great conversation to be able to have because it's about the future of the city and what kind of city we're going to be and how we're going to get there. And I'm proud of the work that I have done with Mayor Ryback, with my colleagues, to make Minneapolis such a great city, even in these tough times. And the reason we've been able to do that is because we've had a vision. We've had a vision about how you build and grow a city that isn't about begging people to come here or smoky back rooms or who's your friend or those old ways. It's been about having a vision for and creating a city that people want to come to, knowing that it's a cheesy old line. If we build it, they will come. If we build it, they will come. And it's been working. Our investments in our biking infrastructure have been huge for the livability of the city and bringing more folks here. It hasn't always been easy. I know it's going to be hard for people to remember a time when Nice Ride bikes were not popular, but I actually had to take the lead on the council to make sure that we could get Nice Ride bikes to happen in the city of Minneapolis. And it's working. You see those green bikes everywhere. They're amazing. It's an amazing part of our city. Transit, same thing. Some of the arguments I've heard tonight and elsewhere about streetcars are the arguments we heard about Hiawatha before Hiawatha opened, and it was an incredible success, that light rail line. And our first streetcar line is going to be an incredible success as well, and that's going to help launch the rest of the system in the city. That's the vision for the city of Minneapolis. Build and grow a city based on the common ground. Now, to be the greatest city, we have to face our greatest challenge. We have the biggest gaps between white people and people of color in the country. And right now is when we as a community get to decide that not only should that end, but that we will end it. And investments in the common ground is one of the key things we need to do to make sure that happens. I'm Betsy Hodges. I'm asking for your first choice vote for mayor. Thanks for having me here tonight.
At this time, I'd like to thank all of you for coming and for the supporting organizations, for the volunteers, the timekeeper, the bell in particular, nothing like a bike bell. And I'd like to give a hand to all of the candidates. I'm sure they'll be hanging around if folks want to stick around and be able to chat for a while. Have a good evening.